So today we're going to be learning about the quadratic formula. Now, in order for the quadratic formula to work, we still need to be able to complete the square. So we're going to create the quadratic formula, not from a regular quadratic function, but in this case, the general quadratic function in standard form. Okay. Now, if you remember, our very first step for completing the square is dividing everything by a. So those a's cancel out, and we're left with x squared plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0. Okay, so now we have a leading coefficient of 1, which is what we need. And since we're going to be completing the square, we need to move the c over a value to the other side. So minus c over a minus c over a. We have x squared plus b over a x, and we're going to leave that blank, plus blank equals negative c over a plus blank. Remember, whatever we add to the left side, we have to add to the right side. So we haven't figured out what that is quite yet, but we will. Remember that what goes into this blank is half of this middle coefficient squared. Okay, so off to the side, we think, what is 1/2 of b over a? Well, that's b over 2a. b over 2a. So this is going to be b over 2a squared. b over 2a squared. We're going to do the same thing here. b over 2a squared is b squared over 4a squared. Okay. So this right side, we want to get it into a single fraction. So we need to get a common denominator. If we have negative, well, let's rewrite it as b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. The common denominator would be 4a squared. So we're going to multiply this c over a by 4a over 4a. And what we're left with is b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Okay, that is replacing the right side of this equation now. Okay, so everything on the right side here are just notes. Well, things to help us with this general formula. So we have x squared minus plus b over a x plus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Now we completed the square on the left side, which means that b over 2a is the exact value we need in our binomial. It's going to be x plus b over 2a quantity squared equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Now from here, we've isolated our perfect square, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, this top is not a perfect square. B squared minus 4ac is not, but 4a squared is. So what we end up with is x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Square root of 4a squared is 2a. Okay, so our last thing, subtract b over 2a from both sides. We end up with x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We have one final step. You'll notice that these have the same denominator, which means we can actually combine the numerators. All we finally end up with is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all of that over 2a. Okay. Now this seems like a pretty complicated formula. Why would this be helpful? Okay. What it means is that we no longer have to complete the square. Instead, if we know A, B, and C, we can go straight into this equation, into this formula, I mean. So let's say we have something like 3x squared plus 5x minus 10 equals 0. Well, A equals 3, B equals 5, C equals -10. We can plug in these values into our formula. This is going to be negative b, so -5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times -10 all over 2 times 3. As we simplify this, we end up with -5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 120. So the square root of 145 all over 6. We can get straight from our quadratic equation to our solution of x. Okay, we'll get more practice in this when we come back to school. In the meantime, try to memorize this formula.